not a lot of people can say they've met Tyra Banks, and you've been around her a great deal. What is she like?
I wouldn't know.
No, you're like, even though you've been, it's kind of like, it makes me think about, that RuPaul show. A lot of the drag queens say that, like, you don't ever see RuPaul. Like, unless the cameras are on, then you see him. But then, if it's not, then he's not even there. So is that kind of the same with Tyra? Like, she was only there when you taped?
Yes, I'll answer this, but full circle. Like, isn't it funny that RuPaul's Drag Race is literally a spinoff of Top Model?
Yeah.
And they have tours, and every single Drag Race contestant, RuPaul's Drag Race contestant, has like millions of followers and buying houses and doing amazing things. Mm-hmm. Whereas all the America's Next Top Models, there's maybe like 10 that have like somehow broken through the stigma of Top Model because the contracts really hold you down. And the contract actually states in there in so many words, very legal terms, that if you win or if you're on the show, that Tyra, she'll make sure that nobody goes past her. And so anyone who goes past her a little bit, like Winnie or whatever, there was like, it's not because of Tyra, you know? But as far as Tyra Banks and her personality, I mean, the cycle 5, she seemed really nice to me in the beginning. And then I realized, like, when I went, because I also went on cycle 6 to teach the girls how to model with Janice Dickinson. But for me, that was just making money, right? Like, to get residuals. But as time went by and I went on All Stars, I saw a huge difference in the way that she was. Definitely not present, doesn't care. Also, behind the scenes in panel, the way that she would try to instigate like really uncomfortable emotions in people was really hard to watch and witness, Like, an example is Shannon, the Christian, right? And she would say, like, so what position do you and your husband like to, like, very invasive, kind of like super tacky questions that like made me secondhand embarrassed for her.
Cringing.
Super.
So do you think some of those really cringe moments don't even make it? Because like, it's like, do you think ever have moments where like they push people too far and they're like, oh, you know what, we'll probably like keep that off?
It's only all the things that they say that are very personal and abusive, and most of the time you don't see that because then they switch the subject really quick. And since you can't talk about production, you're still in that headspace, which is what really, really messed with my head on cycle 5 because they were tormenting me with my childhood sexual molestation trauma, and then they'd flip it, and then ask me questions about the photo shoot. And they're like, you're in this emotion, and it has people like, you're just crazy because of the competition. I don't care about this competition.
But they're like triggering you and then trying to leverage some stuff that's happened in your past to like make a point about what's happening in the moment or a photo shoot or something, which sounds like very dismissive to something that's so serious.
It's so insanely serious. So insanely serious.
So speaking, you are a survivor of sexual child abuse, and I have watch some interviews that you've done, and you've been open about the fact that your like mother's boyfriend, I guess, assaulted you when you were like in 3rd grade or around that age.
3rd to 7th, I was sexually molested and beaten and all the horrible things. So, when Top Models, when I first went on, they give you all these therapy sessions with psychologists.
Like before you go on to the show?
Before you go on the show. Okay. And it's to help them. This is what they tell you, to make sure that you're mentally safe and strong enough to withhold the aftermath of being in the public arena after the show, like mentally that you're capable of handling that. And then also to make sure that you're safe. You won't harm yourself or anyone else in the house while you're filming. Those are the psychological evaluations. It's like 2,000 questions that you do in a day.
Really?
And then next, for me on cycle 5, they had me talk to 2 or 3 different psychologists. And at the time, I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. They're also giving me therapy. Like I get to talk to somebody. Turns out that they just use all of that to use against you.
Oh no! So they're like
totally
collecting. So it's data collection at this point. They can care less about like you actually becoming stronger as a person.
No.
They're collecting this information to then leverage it on the show
to abuse you with it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
really,
so
manipulative.
Really sad. And a lot of people tell me, and I just want to make sure that this gets said because this is what people tell me online all the time, to just get over it. And a lot of reality shows do things like that and manipulate, past traumas. Like, it just is what it is. No, it's not. No, it's not. I fight really hard about Top Model because their confidentiality agreements of not talking about production on the show is 10 years. Now, when you sign these contracts, you go, why on earth would I talk about production?
Why would I need to? This is going to be amazing.
It's glamorous. It's about modeling and makeup, hair. Like, I'm going to be, like, this is going to be so great for my career. Why would I do that? My attorney at the time, and I had my attorney look over it, they said, this contract is literally shit.
And are you talking about, like, cycle 5 contract or, like, 17?
This is cycle 5's
How did you, like, at that point in your life, like, how did you, like, even, like, afford an attorney to look at, like, a contract?
My boyfriend's next door neighbor in his condo building was a huge attorney, and they loved playing they loved watching baseball together. And so he told her that I was going on Top Model, and she goes, oh God, that doesn't sound good. Let me look at the contract. Yeah. So she looked it over for me for free, everything. Her name's Rahel, and shout out to Rahel. But she's like, this is not good. I just want to let you know that if they do anything to you, nobody's liable. And also that they're going to control your career. So definitely whatever you do, don't win, just be memorable. So she gave me that note. And she knew that I'd been modeling for 10 years already. So she's like, you'll probably kill it. And this is probably just me being overprotective of you. But I'm just letting you know that this is the shittiest contract I've ever seen in my life, right? So I was like, okay. I took it with a grain of salt. And I was just so experienced that I just felt like, I can handle this. Yeah, like I've lived in models' apartments around the world already. Like, there's no way that this is gonna affect me. Yeah. And I've done tons of productions, but real entertainment industry, commercials. I had done a couple of TV scenes, stuff like that for whatever. So I was like, oh, I know production. I just never done reality TV. So to find out now, after all this time has gone by, and me trying to speak out and always getting like shunned and abused by the toxic fandom, being like, you need to get over it.
Oh, so they're toxic. The fans?
I'd say for me, if you're a villain, if you're portrayed as a villain, then basically Tyra just basically created like an insurrection on your life forever because it repeats in I think it's 184 countries. Yeah. Like, that's insanity. Do you know what I mean?
And just to be clear, so when they say you can't talk about production, like, what does that mean? Like, you can't talk about Tyra or the people who worked on set? Like, you can't talk about, like, behind the scenes? Like, what exactly does that?
You can't talk about production. And also production signs the contracts, too, that they can't talk about production and talk about what you're doing. So when people get mad and other girls and contestants are coming out, too, and being like, they completely abused me. And other people will say, well, production did that too. And you're like, yeah, but production is also under the contracts that they put them under. So even if they wanted to speak out, they wouldn't be able to. So in a lot of ways, this is all just a huge, like, have you ever seen the Stanford prison experiment?
No, I've heard of it, though.
This is exactly Top Model, modeled America's Next Top Model after the Stanford prison experiment.
Is that the one where they, like, made people, like, prisoners do things to each other?
Yeah, okay, so it was an experiment at Stanford, and they had some people, they've all volunteered, they get paid for this experiment. They have people who they decided that are going to be the guards. And then they have people who are going to be the prisoners. And then they play off of that. And with their own psyche, right, of what they do, they tell the guards to make sure that the prisoners are always like being controlled and doing what they need to do. So a prime example is one of the guys in this prison experiment, he wanted out and they wouldn't let him leave. And so what they did is they started like beating him. Now, granted, Top Model didn't physically... I mean, it did harm people with challenges or whatever. But, and then if he still didn't do what he said because he's decided not to follow the directions of the guards, then they started starving them and then started not allowing them to sleep, keeping them awake. And you'd think that the other prisoners would stick up for that person, but they don't because they don't want the same treatment.
And it shows like that experiment like depicts like power dynamics and like how those... So the guards are kind of like the production, and they really just do whatever they're told, and there's no real.
Yes, and they also get off on it too, the control.
Yeah.
And so you see that if you ever stick up for yourself, you're just going to get abused worse.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they're gonna also turn the other prisoners on
against you
by telling them that the reason why, like for instance, the guy that refused to eat and refused to follow directions, they then tell everyone that, okay, well, if he doesn't do what you want, what
you
he's
guys
supposed
will
to,
suffer.
now you guys are going to suffer too. And so that's just the way it goes, and that is top model. This is not comparable to any other reality show, and I'm going to say this because this is a fact. Top Model's confidentiality agreement is 10 years to not talk about production, or you get sued for millions and millions of dollars. That lasts for 10 years. Not one other reality show that I've ever researched has a 10-year on production, like
which is weird because why would they need that?
confidentiality.
You know, if
It
they're just
doesn't-
having a normal show with normal, you know, production people and it's a competition, it shouldn't be that serious.
That is the same amount of time, 10 years, that the statute of limitations is to report abuse in a workplace.
So
They knew
it's-
exactly what they were doing from day one.